Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the second lecture in Chapter 19. So we're going to look at some external and then some internal structures of the heart. And so in this figure, which is your textbook figure, you can see the superior and inferior vena cava, which drain blood into the right atrium here. The right atrium then leads to the right ventricle, which is right here. From the right ventricle, blood moves out through this pulmonary trunk and leads to both the right and left pulmonary arteries. Blood then will move to the lungs, and it comes back through these four pulmonary veins into the left atrium. From the left atrium, blood will move down into the left ventricle. And you can see the apex of the left ventricle right here. So the apex is always found by the left ventricle. Blood moves out from the left ventricle through this ascending aorta, and then it moves out from the aorta to multiple systemic arteries. And so here we can see a brachiocephalic trunk, a left common carotid artery, and a left subclavian artery. Another structure you can see on the anterior view is this structure called the ligamentum arteriosum. This is a remnant of the artery that connected the pulmonary trunk to the aorta during fetal development. And so what this artery did was it allowed blood to move from the pulmonary trunk, and instead of sending the blood to the lungs where there was no oxygen anyways, it would go right to the aorta and then be sent out to the body. And so this ligamentum arteriosum is a remnant of the ductus arteriosus. And so here's a posterior aspect, which shows a lot of the same structures, but you can see them that the heart, though it's flipped over, you still have that left ventricle, left atrium, right ventricle. You can just see these pulmonary veins easier. You can see the pulmonary arteries easier. And you can see a lot of the coronary circulation, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Internally, we also have a lot of unique structures. So again, you have the right atrium, right ventricle, left ventricle. But in this view, you can also see the four valves. So we have this tricuspid valve here. You have the bicuspid or mitral valve here. We have the pulmonary semilunar valve here, and then over here we have the aortic semilunar valve. The tricuspid and the bicuspid valve are attached by these structures called chordae tendineae. These are heartstrings, and they attach to papillary muscles. The papillary muscles keep the atrioventricular valves from inverting and opening to the atria when the ventricles become really high in pressure. We also see this interventricular septum. You don't really see the interatrial septum that separates the atria, but you can see the interventricular septum really well here. This is what separates the ventricles from each other so blood doesn't mix. There is an intraatrial septum that we don't really see here, but what you can see is this remnant, another remnant of, it's known as the fossa ovalis. It used to be a hole called the foramen ovale that allowed blood to move from the right atrium to the left atrium during, again, fetal development, because during that time we are not getting oxygen from our lungs, we're getting it from the placenta. And I just like this picture, so I kept it in. This is figure 1911, shows the chordae tendineae on a real heart, shows the papillary muscles. It's a beautiful picture. So let's look at coronary circulation really quick. Coronary circulation is the circulatory system for the heart. So we talked about pulmonary circulation and systemic circulation. Coronary circulation is a third form of circulation because the heart is not getting any of the nutrients from the blood that it's pumping. So as blood moves through the heart, it doesn't actually get to gain any of that nutrients. The nutrients come when the blood leaves the left ventricle, entering the aorta. The first branches are the right and left coronary arteries. These coronary arteries then branch further, forming interventricular artery or circumflex artery or marginal arteries. And these are what feed the heart muscle, specifically the ventricle muscle. I mean, it feeds all the muscle, but we really need to feed those ventricles because they need a lot of energy to pump that blood out to the body or to the pulmonary circulation. Blood then comes back through cardiac veins. So we have multiple cardiac veins that all drain into a coronary sinus, and there is a small hole in the right atrium where the coronary sinus drains its blood back into the right atrium. So any blockage in your coronary arteries or in the vessels off the coronary artery can lead to problems with the heart pumping properly. And so here is a figure. This is an angiogram showing a blockage in the left common or in the left coronary artery and then in the circumflex artery off that left coronary artery. If there's a blockage and it's a complete blockage, it can actually lead to tissue damage or death, which then can lead to a myocardial infarction or a heart attack. And so this right here is damaged tissue on the left ventricle due to the blockage or occlusion of nutrients from this area. So when you are not able to feed the heart, the cells are deprived of oxygen, and eventually, if they're deprived for too long, they will die. And this leads to the heart attack. If a person loses too much tissue, that person can actually die. And there are lots of types of heart attacks. And they all are very scary. This is one of the leading causes of death. So coronary artery disease is a very common problem, especially in individuals who don't have a good diet or in individuals who have diseases where they have a lot of cholesterol that they produce. I'm going to stop. I know this is a short video, but I'm going to stop here and we'll get into the cardiac muscle in our next video, okay? And the conduction system. Bye.